This was not one of those closeout games where the better team kind of sleepwalks for 2 quarters, lets the crowd get nervous, then remembers who it is in the last 5 minutes.
No! San Antonio walked into Game 5 acting like they were tired of the bit.
They were tired of spotting Portland life, tired of the fake suspense, tired of the young team, maybe not ready yet, conversation. And you could feel that from the opening tip because the Spurs never trailed. Jumped out 17-4, led by as many as 28, won 114-95 and closed the series 4-1 for their first playoff series win since 2017. Victor Wembanyama finished with 17 points, 14 rebounds, and 6 blocks. De'Aaron Fox had 21 and 9 assists. Julian Champagnie added 19, and Dylan Harper gave them 17 more.
And honestly, that's the thing that stood out most.
This game was supposed to be about pressure. Closeout game, young core, a Blazers team with nothing to lose. A series that had already gotten chippy, messy, and a little weird. But San Antonio made it feel simple. Not easy, exactly. Portland still fought. Portland still made that late push. But simple. The Spurs played like a team that had already figured out the emotional part of the series and just needed to finish the paperwork. And that's why this game matters more than the final score. Because if you just read the box score, you'll see Wemby's double-double, Fox's 21, 6 Spurs in double figures, Portland shooting 23% from 3. And you'll go, okay, cool, better team won, which is true. But that's not really the story. The story is that San Antonio won this game before Portland ever had a chance to drag it into their kind of night. The Spurs dictated the tone immediately, and once they did that, the whole game felt like Portland trying to borrow somebody else's script.
What I loved about the Spurs in this one is that they didn't come out hunting a masterpiece from Wembanyama. They came out hunting control.
That sounds small, but it's not. A lot of young teams in this spot start thinking the star has to author the moment. So the offense gets sticky, guys hold the ball an extra beat. Everybody starts looking for the cinematic possession. San Antonio did the opposite. They played fast, they played clean, and they trusted that the pressure would build naturally if they just kept making Portland guard multiple actions. And right away you saw it. Champagnie hit early threes, Castle and Harper got downhill, Fox kept the game organized. Wemby didn't need 15 points in the first half to own the game because his presence was already warping everything. NBA.com had the Spurs at 66.7% from the field and 46.7% from 3 in the first half, which tells you how comfortable the offense looked once Portland started reacting instead of initiating. That's the first big takeaway here. Wemby's dominance in Game 5 was more atmospheric than statistical. 17 and 14 with 6 blocks is obviously ridiculous in its own right. Casual alien stuff. But this wasn't one of those games where he had to put on the cape offensively. This was one of those games where he made every Portland decision feel slightly wrong. Tiago Splitter said after the game that defending and attacking against Wembanyama is extremely difficult because he can basically contest the 3 and the rim at the same time. And yeah, that's kind of the entire problem. You can run decent offense but still feel like you ran bad offense because the geometry is broken.
That late block on Deni Avdia's floater was kind of the perfect snapshot.
Portland had finally gotten the game to a place where maybe, just maybe, you could convince yourself there was some drama left. They went on an 11-0 run, cut it to 91-82 with 8 minutes left. And for a second, the building probably got a little tight. Not panic, but tight. And then Wemby sent Avdia's shot off the top of the backboard and into the crowd like he was rejecting the entire concept of a comeback. That wasn't just a block. That was emotional cleanup. It told everybody in the arena, yeah, nice try, but no, we're done here.
And that's why I actually think Fox was just as important as Wemby in this game, maybe even more important to the feeling of the win.
Because once Portland cut it to single digits, that was the exact moment where the game could have gotten annoying.
Not dangerous necessarily, annoying.
You know the kind of game I mean. You're better, you've controlled the night, and suddenly now you have to deal with fake-believe threes, weird whistles, and a home crowd starting to do the anxious murmur thing. That's when veteran shot creation matters. That's when having a real closer matters. Fox scored 13 in the fourth quarter, and it felt like every time Portland leaned forward a little, he shoved them right back in their seat. NBA.com noted that when the Blazers made their push, Fox took over to prevent the comeback, and that's exactly how it looked.
He didn't make this dramatic. He made it adult.
That's the De'Aaron Fox effect on this version of the Spurs. He gives them a way to end nonsense. Wemby bends the entire game. Fox ends possessions, ends runs, ends that little voice in the opponent's head that starts whispering, maybe. Victor himself said after the game that Fox knows how to step up in the right moments and knows how to share with teammates, which is pretty much the cleanest description of what Fox does for them. He doesn't just score, he stabilizes.
And man, that matters so much for a young team.
Because let's be honest, a big part of this series was San Antonio learning how not to get dragged into chaos. They won Game 1 comfortably, then lost Game 2 after Wembanyama suffered a concussion and didn't return. Portland stole that one, 106-103 behind Scoot Henderson's 31. And suddenly, the series had that, hang on, are we doing this? Energy. Then Wemby missed Game 3 entirely while in concussion protocol, and San Antonio still won 120-108 because Stephon Castle dropped 33. Then Wemby came back in Game 4 with 27, 11, and 7 blocks in a 114-93 win. So by the time Game 5 showed up, the Spurs had already answered most of the questions. The only one left was whether they'd come out sharp enough to bury the series cleanly. They did.
That's why I keep coming back to the opening stretch.
Mitch Johnson said the Spurs couldn't afford another early double-digit deficit like they had in Games 3 and 4, and you could tell that message landed. San Antonio's 17-4 start wasn't just hot shooting. It was a statement about mindset. They were the aggressor. They were the ones throwing the first punch. Even Wembanyama said afterward, "It's never perfect, of course, but that's exactly what we said we wanted to do before the game." That matters because young teams don't usually speed up the maturity timeline like this unless they have real internal buy-in.
And I think that's where someone like Champagnie becomes more important than people realize.
Because yeah, Wemby is the engine of fear. Fox is the closer. But a closeout game can get weird fast if the role guys don't show up early. Champagnie had 19, went 5 for 7 from deep, and was basically the guy who made Portland pay for loading up elsewhere. He gave San Antonio that opening punch. He made the floor feel even wider. And once the Spurs are getting star gravity plus clean role player shooting, it starts to feel a little unfair. Like, what exactly are you taking away at that point?
The other thing I thought was interesting is that this didn't feel like San Antonio playing some perfect game.
That's actually why I like them more after this.
Because Portland did not quit at all. Denny Avdija had 22. They cut the lead. They kept scrapping. Even in a game where the Spurs clearly had the higher gear, Portland still forced them to reassert themselves late. And San Antonio answered without spiraling. That's a big boy playoff trait. Not, we were flawless. More like, we got a little loose, but the second it got disrespectful, we fixed it. That's different.
And look, some of this is just the Wemby effect accelerating everything.
We've kind of gotten numb to how insane his timeline already is. In Game 1 of this series, he scored 35 in his playoff debut, which was a Spurs franchise record, passing Tim Duncan's 32 from 1998. AP also noted that his 21 first-half points in that debut were the most in the opening half of a playoff debut since the league's play-by-play era began in 1997. Then he misses a game because of a concussion, comes back with 27 and 7 blocks, and now closes the series not by going nuclear as a scorer, but by making the whole court feel like it has a ceiling fan over the rim. That's not normal growth. That's franchise warping stuff.
But I also don't think this series should be framed like it was only about the Spurs.
Portland deserves real credit here.
They were the 7 seed. They came out of the play-in. They stole Game 2 on the road after Wemby's injury. They competed physically all series. And even in this game, when it looked like they were about to get run off their own stage, they still cut it to single digits and forced San Antonio to execute. Avdija had a strong season and led them with 22 here. But the larger issue showed up too. They just did not have enough shot making in this matchup. They went 11 for 47 from 3 in Game 5. And when your margin for error is already thin against a defense like this, 23% from deep is basically asking to lose by double digits.
And the scoop piece matters too. He scored 31 in Game 2, but in this closeout, he had just 5 points. AP connected some of that drop to the aftermath of the skirmish with Dylan Harper late in Game 3. And whether or not that was the whole reason, the broader point is simple. Portland's young creators were forced to deal with way more size, way more length, and way more cumulative pressure than they were comfortable with by the end of the series. That's not some moral failing. That's playoff basketball. Sometimes the lesson is just, you're not there yet.
So the bigger picture here is pretty obvious and also pretty scary if you're the rest of the West.
This wasn't just San Antonio winning a series. This was San Antonio looking like a team that already understands who it is. The Spurs didn't need a heroic 40 ball. They didn't need a miracle shooting night from everyone. They just needed their formula. Wemby distorts the game, Fox cleans up the mess. The young perimeter guys attack with confidence. The role players make enough shots, and the defense eventually turns your offense into a bad idea. That's a real identity. And for a team this young, that's a problem for everybody else.
It also says a lot that this is their first series win since 2017 because it makes the moment feel bigger than one round.
This is the point where the rebuild stops being theoretical.
This is where the future is bright, turns into, okay, now we actually have to deal with these people. Mitch Johnson, stepping in after Greg Popovich's health issues, now has his first series win as a playoff coach. Wemby has his first. Castle has his first. Harper has his first. And Fox, maybe most importantly, looks like the veteran bridge between young chaos and serious postseason basketball. That's not just a nice story. That's infrastructure.
And honestly, that may be the scariest part of all.
Because I don't think San Antonio played this Game 5 like a team celebrating round one. I think they played it like a team irritated by the possibility of wasting time.
That's a very different energy. They didn't come out hunting applause. They came out hunting efficiency. They wanted the series over. They wanted Portland on a plane home. And they wanted to sit back and watch Denver and Minnesota beat each other up a little longer. Very respectful. Very professional. A little rude if we're being honest, but in a good way.
So yeah, the final score says Spurs 114, Blazers 95.
But the real story is that San Antonio looked older than its age, sharper than its age, and calmer than its age. Wemby was the giant shadow over the whole game. Fox was the fourth quarter grown-up. Champagne and the supporting cast made the early avalanche possible, and Portland, to its credit, made them prove it.
They did! Now, the real fun starts. Because round one was about whether this young Spurs team could handle playoff pressure.
Game 5 felt like their answer was basically, yeah, man, and we are already kind of bored with that question.
So now the question changes.
Not, are the Spurs ahead of schedule?
We're past that. The question now is how far this thing can go before the rest of the league fully accepts that San Antonio is not building towards something anymore.
They're here.
And if Wemby is already winning series while still having games where 17 points somehow feels almost quiet, that should probably make everybody a little uncomfortable. As for Portland, I'd actually come away from this series feeling pretty good if I'm them. They fought, they got a playoff win, they got real reps for a young core, and they learned exactly how far they still have to go. Sometimes that's what a useful playoff loss looks like. It's not pretty, but it's honest.
And for San Antonio, this was the kind of closeout that tells you something.
Not that they can win.
That part we already knew.
It told you they know how they want to win. And that's when a young team stops being cute and starts being dangerous.